All right. I think we'll make a start because it's just after 5:30. I don't know whether people can hear me, and every single person's got their camera turned off, which makes this a slightly bizarre experience. Um, Alastair, I don't know if, or Doug, if you could tell me whether you can hear me, that'd be very helpful. You can. Good.
I can hear you,
Excellent.
yeah.
Great. All right. Thank you. Right. I will press on. I'm Anna Vigars. I'm a criminal silk in Chambers, and I'm also the head of Chambers. And we're going to have, over the course of the evening, short presentations from Debbie Grennan, who's one of our, there she is, as if by magic, one of our most senior employment practitioners, and she's also one of our equality and diversity officers. And Doug Leach you can see on the screen, and James Haskell will be around, I hope, somewhere too. They're both head of Pupillage. And then we've also got three of our more recent pupils. Alastair, whose face you can see, Jack Barros and Ollie Murrell, who practice Alastair in personal injury, Jack in crime, and Ollie in property. So a good mixture of people from whom you can hear, but more importantly, really, people to whom you can talk. So the first thing that I want to say is simply this. If any of you has got a question, please don't keep it, don't wait, just stick it in the chat. There's Ollie, evening. Stick it in the chat and we will make sure that at some stage it gets answered. It may well get answered by one of us as we go along, but otherwise we'll make sure it's answered at some stage during the discussion later in the evening. Debbie and I certainly are going to speak and then disappear. There are two reasons. One of them relates to the other work commitments that we've got for the rest of the evening. But the more important reason really is this, that each one of us wants this to be your evening. In other words, we want this to be something that's really useful for you. And we don't think it's terribly useful if senior people hang around. Much more useful if you just get the opportunity to speak to the three most recent pupils so that you can really grill them about what pupillage is like in Guildhall, and they don't have to say anything in front of the head of Chambers or very senior members of Chambers. So that's why Debbie and I certainly, and possibly James and Doug, are also going to disappear. So, as I say, the first thing is do get typing with any questions into the chat. The second thing is this: you'll have noticed that this webinar is being recorded, and in due course we're going to make it available to people on the through YouTube and make it available to people on our website. And so we assume, me having said that and the warning being on the website, that if you are content, if you're staying on the call, then you're content to be recorded. So with that said, let me just say a little about Guildhall, and one of the questions that people sometimes ask, and I've sat in horrible numbers now of pupillage interviews and also interviews for new members of staff or for established barristers who want to come and join us. And one of the questions that people ask again and again is, why would I want to come to Guildhall? Why Guildhall rather than another set of chambers? And I think there are probably three key features about Guildhall which I've known and benefited from over the last 26 years that I've been in Chambers. And those three key features are that we like to think, and I think probably our practices bear this out, we are excellent at what we do. We are busy, and so we are constantly looking to expand, and we're ambitious in terms of where we're expanding and how we're expanding and into what kinds of work we're expanding. And I think also we're friendly. And by that, I don't mean that every day, all day, all 80 of us as members of Chambers and 20 members of staff get on like a house on fire. I mean, really, that like any decent family, there are times when things go wrong and we're not getting on so well. But on the whole, most of the time, most of Chambers operates in a pretty friendly and supportive environment. And I think that's really important when you're a pupil. I think it's important that you come to a set where you are valued from the off. And what none of our pupils knows before they arrive, but what each one of them, I think, experiences once they're here, is that they are very much welcomed and looked forward to in this place. Pupils don't turn up here without people knowing within their team that they're expected, and without plans being made for their arrival, and without people really wanting to meet them, wanting to see what they're like. And each of our pupils is recruited very much on the basis that they are part of our future. So we don't, unlike some sets, we don't take on large numbers of pupils thinking that over the course of the year of pupillage, one or two of them will fall by the wayside. We tend to take on pupils having identified a business need for somebody in that particular team for that particular year. And we very much hope that each person into whom we invest an enormous amount of our time and our energy and our thought, we hope that each person flourishes and that in due course each one of them becomes a member of Chambers. So I hope that, and I'm not saying that pupillage is an easy year, of course it isn't. It's like a year-long interview. But it's like that wherever you go. And there are some sets where it's a year-long interview with people willing you on and cheering for you and trying to clear the path ahead of you. There are other sets where I think it's very considerably more difficult. And in Guildhall, we like to try and operate in the first way so that people are welcomed, that they are made to feel confident in what they're doing, and that they very quickly become a fixture around the place. In terms of the work that pupils and members of Chambers do, that in terms of its geographical spread, that very much depends on what sort of work you do. If you do criminal work, for example, it tends to be across the Western Circuit. If you do commercial or personal injury or employment work, excuse me, there tends to be more of a national coverage to that work. And in the fields in which we operate, Guildhall, although we're a set out of London, we tend to have a national reputation for the work that we're doing. So whatever the ambition is and whatever it is that you're interested in, there are thriving teams here. One thing that I think it's worth being aware of before you come is that we are divided quite clearly into a number of discrete teams. There are some people who practice across a few teams, so some of our commercial practitioners might do insolvency or might do property from time to time, but there are some quite clear team boundaries. And we're looking for people who are keen and who are eager to build their career in one or possibly two fields, but not somebody who's going to turn up and say, oh, I'd like to do a little bit of everything and see where I go from there. Because we pride ourselves on being specialists, and we pride ourselves on being excellent in the fields in which we operate. And we don't think that any longer we can carry on doing that across a wide field. You can hear I'm struggling to keep speaking. And so I'm not going to carry on for much longer. What I wanted to do as head of Chambers was to say two things. Firstly, you are so welcome to our seminar, and we look forward to seeing applications from you. And secondly, that we're proud of the place in which we work. It's more to us than just a place to work. It's a real place of support and encouragement, and a place in which we find our friends. So with that, I'm going to hand over to others.
Perhaps this might be an opportunity for me to step in as EDO and give you some insight as I see it into pupillage at Guildhall. Firstly, let me introduce myself. My name is Debbie Grennan. I'm a member of the Employment and Discrimination team. I've been practicing for 20-something years, 12 of which have been at Guildhall, and I would say that the best 12 years of my practice, without doubt. Throughout my time here, I've been heavily involved in the shortlisting of pupillage applications and regularly sit on our selection panels. Perhaps most significantly for today, though, I'm one of 2 Chambers EDO officers, a role that I share with my colleague from the crime team, Jenny Tallentire. And Chambers wide, there is a very strong commitment to all issues around equality, diversity and inclusion in all respects and at all career stages, from working with schools and encouraging youngsters to see law as a viable career for them, to our mini pupillage processes, tenancy decisions, and then at the opposite end, so far as applications for silk and judicial appointment are concerned. And that commitment isn't just words or sound bites. The work we've done and continue to do is real world, practical work to improve equality. And it really is making a difference in our view. Let me just give you an example of some of the things that we've been doing in the last couple of years, which I hope will demonstrate the point I've been making. Firstly, Chambers has committed to the bar non-pledge. Some of you may be aware of this. This is our commitment to offer at least 50% of our mini pupillages to students from disadvantaged or underrepresented groups. This is making a real difference in giving all students a really good opportunity to experience life at the bar, decide whether it's for them, but also to have that important experience on their CVs. We also have introduced a system of paying expenses for our mini pupillages, and this really is to ensure that nobody is unable to experience mini pupillage with us because they can't afford to get to or to stay in Bristol. And again, it's something that's been very much welcomed by those who've been able to utilise that. We also introduced a paid internship scheme last summer and gave an opportunity for a student to spend an extended period of time in Chambers, but also to experience other legal environments on a paid basis, such as marshalling with judges in courts and tribunals. We've also increased our pupillage funding for each pupillage to 50,000 for the next recruitment round for the pupillage year. And that really is to reflect the rising cost of living for everyone. And we recognise that hits our pupils just as much as it does everybody else. We also have in place really robust processes around shortlisting, interviewing and assessment of applicants, and the way we select our pupils. It will not be your school, your university, or the lottery of life in terms of your background, which dictates whether you'll be offered a pupillage at Guildhall or not, because we go out of our way to try to provide a level playing field for everyone who applies to us. If you receive a pupillage offer and choose to accept it, which of course we hope you will, we have really strong support mechanisms in place during the pupillage year. And hopefully people like Alastair later on in the call will not make a liar of me and say that's not true at all. But some of the types of things that we do and we have in place in Chambers is, for example, we have really experienced and, in my view, super dedicated pupillage supervisors in Chambers. There will be regular reviews and feedback, so no last-minute nasty surprises at the end of your pupillage. We have a high level of input into your pupillage, into the experience that you get from members of the wider team in which you are undertaking your pupillage. You will have a mentor from outside your own team, And Jenny and I, as the EDO officers, will be keeping a close eye on you and meeting with you at certain touch points in the pupillage process, just to check on you as to how things are going, whether any support is needed. We have a really strong team of clerks, and guess what? They really just want you to succeed in a way that is achievable and sustainable in the longer term. The days of working pupils so hard that they're literally burned out by the end of the pupillage processes, I hope are long gone, certainly are in this chambers. And then at the end of pupillage, and I think Anna has already made the point very clearly, but the best thing, in my view, about pupillage at Guildhall is that we only offer pupillage with a view to tenancy. We don't recruit a pupil if there is no business need for a tenant at the end of the pupillage. And that's really important, I think, because if you're, for example, one of 4 pupils, which I think we have this year, you're not competing with your peers. It's not a question of 1 or 2 of you out of the 4 will be accepted and the others will have to find somewhere else. That's not the way it works here. And that means that you can really support each other, draw on the support from your peers. All you need to focus on is meeting the required standard. And if you do that, you should rightfully expect to be offered tenancy here. Now, Jenny and I have worked quite hard over the last couple of years to ensure high levels of support once your pupillage comes to an end and you're making the transition from pupillage to tenancy, because that's the point at which you're navigating those quite difficult early years of practice. We have a wide-ranging measure of a package of measures in place to really make sure that the support and the encouragement and those pairs of ears don't disappear as soon as the pupillage ends. So we regularly meet with our junior tenants and have drop-in sessions and so on to find out from them how they're getting on in those early years, what their challenges are, what we can do to help and support them. And again, that's been a really fundamental way of the way in which Chambers is trying to support tenants at a junior level. And what we also do is recognise that Jenny and I don't know it all, far from it. We're testing different measures, seeing how effective they are, seeing what works, what doesn't. And the best thing that we do, I think, is talk to our current pupils and those who've just been through the process to try to find out from them what's effective, what isn't, and what else they think we can do. And I think by working as a team in that way, which is a big part of the way Guildhall Chambers works, I hope that we can put in place an environment where every opportunity is there for a pupil to flourish. So in summary, what we're about is this. We want to recruit and keep the people we feel have the potential, given the chance, to be great barristers and members of these chambers. Finally, I think I'd just like to add 2 further points. Firstly, we have in Chambers, whatever your level of call, robust systems for monitoring work. So, for example, looking at the allocation of work, fair access to opportunities, and how each individual's practice is developing. And that is something which we devote a significant amount of time to, but which in our view is essential if we're to keep that level playing field that we try to offer during pupillage, during the rest of your career at the bar. And finally, we also hold our clerks to account, and we do that in a really meaningful way. And believe it or not, they love the fact that we do that, and they love to show us the fairness in allocation of work and how people's practice is being developed. They take great pride in that. And said that really rounds the entirety of the Chambers team when it comes to giving you an opportunity to be successful. And if we find from any source that there is a situation that needs attention, if there's a problem, we deal with it. we act on it straight away, and we don't for a moment think that, you know, we don't get everything right all of the time. We know we can learn more, and that's a process we hope to continue going forward. So with my EDO hat on, that's what I have to say about pupillage in Chambers, and really about the ethos that Chambers has so far as equality and inclusion is concerned. So nothing more from me. I think it's time I handed over to whoever it is who wants to take on the next part of this webinar.
I think that's us. Yes. Thank you. So my name's James Haskell, and I'm sitting next to Douglas Leach, and we're jointly responsible for pupillage at Guildhall Chambers. So I just wanted to spend a few minutes just talking about the system that we have in Chambers, and maybe one or two thoughts about how you might want to think about the preparation for your applications, and indeed preparing for interviews if you're fortunate enough to be invited to pupillage interviews during the recruitment process. So I suspect you will know that we recruit via the pupillage gateway, and that application window opened a few weeks ago at the beginning of January, and the application window will close on the 7th of February. And it's then on the 10th of May that the pupillage gateway permits all chambers then to make applications or to make offers for pupillage. And I think the position still is that candidates can submit up to 20 applications, I think, to different chambers. So clearly, one of the important things that I always stress to potential candidates is to make sure that you really think about the chambers that you want to apply to, and ensure that your applications are targeted in that way, given that you are limited to the number that you can make. And at Guildhall, and many chambers are similar, there are three main stages to our pupillage process. The first, of course, is the written application that you have to submit to the gateway, and that goes through then a fairly rigorous marking process. We have for a number of years now ensured that every form is marked at least twice, and obviously we then undertake a moderating process to ensure that the way in which those forms are marked are consistent and fair. And then the second part of the recruitment process is the first round interview stage, and that is typically a relatively short interview, usually no more than about 15 minutes or so, in which we invite candidates to perform a short advocacy exercise, and therefore that part of the recruitment really is very much focused on oral skills. And then if the third and usually the final stage of the recruitment process is the second round interview, and that's typically a longer interview in which we will invite candidates to engage in a legal problem, and will usually involve a longer advocacy exercise, and also questions wider than the legal problem, and in relation to any questions that we might have about the written application that was made. So those are the three main stages. We did a number of years ago decide that we wanted to try and ensure that we continued to get the best candidates. We decided to make the first interview shorter so that we could interview more people at that stage. And as I say, the second round interview is normally a longer interview, maybe about 45 minutes or so. So that's how we normally run the recruitment process. We don't have any set numbers in terms of we will only ever invite so many individuals for first and second round. It's very much based on depending on the number of applicants we get, and indeed the quality of them. And if we get good quality applicants, then we clearly want to invite as many people to interview as possible. And the recruitment process, the written applications, and indeed the interviews, all candidates are marked as against various competencies, and those competencies will include, for example, their evidence of their oral skills, evidence of their particular interest in the practice area to which they have applied. The other competencies, for example, will include written communication skills, and obviously the quality of the form that they have produced. So those are the sorts of competencies that each and every applicant will be marked against, again, to ensure that everyone is judged by the same fair standards. And with that in mind, just a few things that I hope might be helpful, and what I hope would be useful to you. The number one thing I would say is give yourselves plenty of time to make the applications that you want to, and to fill in the forms properly. I'm always surprised, notwithstanding how many years I've been responsible for pupillage, as to quite how many written applications that we still receive that are littered sometimes with silly mistakes or spelling mistakes. It obviously doesn't create the sort of impression that you would want to. And for my part, I always think it's an easy thing that you can get right if you give yourself sufficient time to do the form and to check it, and perhaps to get a friend to check it, and do it again and again, because you will appreciate that with the large numbers of applications that we receive, if you've got an application that's got lots of spelling mistakes or poor grammar, then it makes the marker's job easy to reject that person as against the other applications. So my number one tip would be, don't leave the application form to the last minute. Give yourself plenty of time to fill in the form, and give yourself sufficient time to check it and double check it and triple check it before you end up submitting it to the gateway, because it really is, it seems to me, quite clear the sorts of forms that have been cobbled together at the last minute compared with those that have not. So give yourself plenty of time, and also, as I said before, you want to think carefully about the chambers that you are applying to. And again, I'm always surprised by the number of applications that you sometimes get where that thought hasn't been given, and what has happened is that a candidate has copied and pasted a section of their form, having applied to a different set of chambers. So for example, last year, we had a candidate who was saying how keen they were to do family law, and of course Guildhall Chambers have never, or haven't for a very, very long time, done family law, and that's because part of the form was simply copied and pasted from another application. So please don't do that, because you're doing yourself a big disservice if you do. So give yourself plenty of time, and you want to, if you possibly can, to I think always to try and make your answers as short and concise as you possibly can, because again, we appreciate that markers are having to mark a large number of forms, and the answers that are short and concise and to the point really do stand out to the markers, that compared with those that are not. And the form obviously is the important part, because it's the gateway into giving you an opportunity to come to Chambers, to be interviewed, and to show what a brilliant candidate you are. So getting that form right really is, I think, so important. But also, if you have the opportunity to be able to give yourselves practice in terms of interviews. I know, for example, only this weekend, one of the inns were offering mock interview exercises. If you get the opportunity to do that before the interview stage gets well underway, if you have the opportunity, again, take advantage of it, because some of those sessions that inns and other organisations offer really are brilliant at enabling you the opportunity just to get a feel for the sorts of questions, and also sometimes just answering questions under pressure, and it gives you the opportunity to understand and react to those sorts of situations, and give yourselves confidence to be able to deal with those in the interview setting. And in terms of what Guildhall are looking for, we obviously want to recruit and ensure that the very best candidates are selected. And that doesn't necessarily mean identifying somebody who, and we don't expect candidates to be polished and the absolute finished article. Obviously, what we are looking for are candidates who we think have the potential to be truly excellent barristers who want to practice in the area that they have identified, candidates who want to apply and want to be at Guildhall Chambers, and who have the sorts of skills that we think that will make them brilliant advocates. And obviously, to some extent, those skills might be slightly different, or there might be a slightly different emphasis on some skills in some practice areas other than others. But in many respects, a lot of those skills are the same. And as I said, we are really looking for candidates who have the potential to excel and really add to our chambers. So that's, I hope, a flavour of what Chambers is looking for, and how we go about that process. I suspect you know, we may have already said, but at part of this year's recruitment exercise, we are advertising for 4 pupilages, 1 criminal pupillage, and then 3 civil pupilages, all to start in October 2025. 1 personal injury, 1 employment, and 1 commercial, in addition to the criminal pupillage. So I hope that gives you some insight into the process and what we as a Chambers are looking for in terms of successful candidates and how we go about that process. So that's, I think, probably enough for me. I don't know, Doug, if there's anything that you wanted to add to what I've said.
Not particularly. I'll just make a couple of additional points. So when it comes to the shortlisting for interview stage, please be assured, as part of quality and diversity initiatives that Debbie has spoken to you about, we do practice name blind marking, so that that's a well-recognised system for ensuring and guarding against any sort of unconscious bias that may be present in the marking process. So we're very careful about how we conduct the process in that respect. I would also add that you have to be very conscious when applying that you are applying for specialist pupilages, and the way to make your application stand out is for it to be coherent by reference to the specialism that you're applying for the pupillage in. So do think carefully about the overall picture that you paint in your application in terms of your experiences and your interests, and how you bring all of those strands together to present the case for your candidature for the particular pupillage you're applying for. It is a form of written advocacy exercise, so that I would add that point to the point that James was making at the beginning about ensuring that your application doesn't have spelling mistakes and so forth. It's good to step back and reflect on a first draft, for instance, and think about how you can improve the overall coherence of it by reference to the relevant specialism. But other than that, I don't have anything to add on the process. And I think that Ollie and Alastair are going to speak to you now about their experiences recently of pupillage.
Thanks, Doug. We're also joined by Jack, but I'm told he has trouble getting his mic switched on, so he may be able to join at some point and explain more about life as a crime pupil and as a recent crime tenant. I'm Ollie. I'm in the property trusts and estates team. My practice is predominantly in the area of chancery law, but I also undertake some instructions in commercial and more in insolvency as well. Alastair, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yes, so I'm Alastair, obviously, and I am a recent tenant in the personal injury and clinical negligence team. For our year, there were two of us, and there are 2 tenants, but the other one is not here, so it's just me speaking on behalf of the personal injury and clinical negligence team. There are a number of different areas within that field. So there is obviously personal injury, clinical negligence, but there's a lot of other areas as well. So disciplinary, court of protection, costs. So there's quite a wide range of areas if you're interested. So there's a good scope to do so. And there's different people have got different areas that they're more keen to practice in. So again, that was one very interesting thing about pupillage, being able to see different people's slightly different practice areas, and to see which area which niche you would want to carve out for yourself, really.
In terms of the property trusts and estates pupillage I did, it was very much, although specialist in that particular area, very much seen as a broad pupillage across the whole commercial chancery range. So throughout pupillage, I variously was in the Supreme Court on a banking case with 4 other members of Chambers in a first 6 pupil capacity. I was also in the Court of Appeal on a trusts and property matter, shadowing my supervisor, and then all the way through to doing my own cases, which can be anything from financial services in Bromford County Court to winding up petitions in the High Court in Bristol. There is a huge variety of commercial chancery work, and just because we're offering a commercial pupillage doesn't mean you won't be able to experience some of the more broader parts of that world. I think we're joined by Jack now.
Yeah, sorry, I was having some difficulty getting my camera on. My name's Jack. I completed my pupillage in the crime team in October of last year, so I'm the newest crime tenant. I was lucky enough to do my pupillage under James Haskell, who you can see on the screen. So I spent a lot of time with him, watching him prosecute and defend in cases. But I suppose one of the good things I think across the teams, but especially in the crime team, is you get exposure to a lot of different practitioners from all levels, both prosecuting and defending. Yeah, and since April, I've been prosecuting and defending my own cases in the Magistrates Court, but thankfully very quickly in the Crown Court. And happy to answer all of your questions. I can't recommend pupillage at Guildhall Chambers enough.
I noticed that Debbie has answered one question in the chat about the difference between why you want to join Chambers and why you're interested in a specific area of law. Just picking up on what Debbie has said in response to that, your answer to why you want to practice in, for example, commercial and insolvency law will invariably be relatively similar from Chambers to Chambers, if that is the area you're applying for, whereas question 5 is much more based at why not only do you want to do pupillage at Guildhall, but why do you want to do a commercial and insolvency pupillage at Guildhall? And I do agree there are quite distinct questions where there's an opportunity to really engage with practice at Guildhall in commercial and insolvency, and you might want to look at some of the recent work our silks have done, but also some of the recent work that the most junior tenants have done, and think about what it is that makes you want to apply to Guildhall in particular to do a commercial and insolvency or criminal pupillage. I've also spotted there's another question for me. How would I define commercial and chancery law? Commercial law is exceptionally broad. It's a bit of a catch-all term for anything that can range for contract disputes, shareholder disputes, right through to pension schemes gone wrong. It can also mean financial services, and we've got a number of members of Chambers who do and specialise in consumer credit work. So that can be financial mis-selling. It can be mortgages which have been unfairly sold. Contract, I'm sure you'll all be aware, is relatively well known, but it can also stretch right through to international arbitrations and economic duress arguments. In terms of chancery, generally it is defined as property, trusts and estates work. That will obviously be landlord and tenant. Property co-ownership disputes, trust disputes is for those of you who like equity and trusts. estates is contentious probate, contentious wills, inheritance claims. There's also some overlap with the property and affairs side of court of protection.
I've just seen a question for myself. I would say that the typical cases that you do in your second six tend to be things like stage 3 hearings. So that's where you might have a case that's valued below 25,000 and liability is agreed. So it's just about deciding issues about the quantum. So looking at the Judicial College guidelines and also thinking about in terms of general damages, and then also thinking about the special damages as well. In addition, things like infant approval cases, small claims, credit hires. But then as you move past pupillage, you start to do, and also at the later stages of pupillage as well, you do a lot more fast track work, and that tends to be very interesting. It's very varied. So you can do quite a wide scope, things like occupiers liability, employer liability, product liability, road traffic accidents, Highways Act claims, in addition to application hearings as well. But there's also, so I would say that personal injury and clinical negligence tends to be a lot more court heavy, especially early on, but there is also the opportunity to do a lot of paperwork as well. So drafting pleadings, some advices, things like that. There is also an opportunity to do more advanced work. I don't think this is specifically for personal injury, clinical negligence, but there is the opportunity for deviling as well. So and that's also the opportunity you have during first six to be, when you're shadowing, when you're working with your pupil supervisor, you're working on their cases, which are always going to be very complex, high value, and you get a lot of exposure to those sorts of cases, things that Ollie was mentioning as well, where he was in the Supreme Court and Court of Appeal.
I can see that there's a new question on here that says, do you have any tips for structuring an answer to why do you believe you'll make an exceptional barrister? Probably started by saying I still don't know, and I probably won't know for a long time what makes an exceptional barrister. But I think answering that question should probably focus on, at least in my opinion, should focus on what you think will help you excel within your chosen area. So you've already heard from various people that at least at Guildhall, your pupillage is very specialist, and the area of work you'll be doing will tend to focus on one or two areas. So if I was answering that question from a crime perspective, I would think, well, what makes an exceptional barrister? Well, it's someone who's very good at oral advocacy. So I'd think of examples that I've had before my pupillage application where I perhaps have demonstrated that, whether that be mooting competitions or other forms of advocacy. I'd say you need to be able to deal with a wide range of people. So maybe think of experiences in your life, or ideally in your working life, but if not more widely than that, where you've demonstrated that you can work with a wide range of people. And it's also very hard work. So perhaps you can think of some examples of where you've worked really hard for something. And I think by the time you've highlighted those three competencies and given examples for those, you should have a pretty good answer as to why you think you'll be an exceptional barrister. And maybe you'll even convince yourself by the end of answering that question. I'll let someone else take the next one.
I'll take the next one. How would you react if your instructing solicitor's legal analysis was wrong? This is something you quite frequently crops up in practice, particularly in my area of law, commercial chancery. A great deal of what we do is drafting statements of case, but also advisory work where the solicitor has perhaps already told the client their view of the merits, or they indicate to you what type of claim you should be drafting or advising on. You may need to go and tell them they're wrong. I think the best way to do it is tackle it straight on. There's no point trying to pussyfoot round the problem, because then the solicitor may well miss that you're telling them the their legal analysis is wrong, but also it will allow them to take corrective measures and to do some client management straight as soon as possible. Obviously, you've got to be polite, you've got to be tactful. Don't just rush in and tell your instructing solicitor who sends you your work, which pays your bills, that they're wrong and how on earth could they come to that conclusion. You've got to be tactful about it, but at the same time, you can't avoid that problem.
I think I'd like to add an extra point in response to that question, which is if this occurs in pupillage, you wouldn't want to be absolutely sure that you're right. Discuss the issue with your pupil supervisor and anyone in your team who's around and able to discuss the matter with you. Same would probably apply in the early years of practice too, while you're finding your feet. But as a pupil, you want to be particularly careful that your understanding and impression of the legal position is in fact the correct one before you start telling your solicitor that they've made a mistake.
Yes, I just working off the basis of that as well, I would say that that is one thing that I have found Guildhall Chambers is really good with, both within my team, but also more widely, that you're working within you're working with a lot of other barristers who are all very, very good in their fields, and it's both having the advantage of that wealth of knowledge that they have, but also I found that Guildhall is a very open, friendly set, and I think it's very easy to underestimate that quality. But when you're a pupil, when you're a young tenant, it is really helpful to be able to bounce ideas off and to have an open door policy, because it is very easy to think, well, when you're a barrister, you're just working by yourself, but it does help to be able to have other people to talk to and work problems with, which is something I found really helpful with Guildhall.
And Alastair, I think some of the old tenants would wholeheartedly agree and say we still do the same from time to time.
Just while we're waiting for another question to be thrown into the chat, I maybe can add a crime perspective on the question that Wala asked earlier in terms of the difference between why you want to do an area of law and being in specific chambers. If you think about it this way, speaking particularly from a crime perspective, but I'm sure it is true in other areas as well, a pupillage in London would be different to a pupillage on the Western Circuit, as would a tenancy. A pupillage in Bristol would be different to elsewhere on the Western Circuit. A crime pupillage at Guildhall is different to another crime pupillage elsewhere at Chambers in Bristol. So if you think about it like that, it becomes quite easy to split out the different chambers and think, well, actually, really, what do I want to be here, and why do I want to be at this set? And then you have a completely different answer as to just why do I want to do crime, which might be an answer that you can use more across the board. There's a new question on here. It says, are there opportunities to network with fellow pupils and tenants? Yeah, absolutely. At least in your pupillage, and I think this is a good thing, you're expected to be in chambers a lot of the time. And as a result of that, you'll meet a large amount of people, both within your team and otherwise. There's lots of opportunities to network with not only fellow pupils, but people that have recently been through the process with you. So, for example, this week I'm doing a trial in Bristol, and our current crime pupil is with me, and we'll probably do. I don't know if you can. If we call it networking, but we might do something social one of the evenings after that, and she'll meet other barristers from other chambers that I know. So there's plenty of opportunities, both with your fellow pupils and with other tenants in both within your own chambers and other sets in Bristol to network. Yes.
I'll just add to that. You also in pupillage have to do 2 or 3 courses, which are split over, I think, 3 weekends with all of the pupils on circuit. And that is a great opportunity to meet your fellow pupils who otherwise you might not get a chance to meet because they're in Winchester and you're in Bristol, or you're in Bristol and they're in London. And that has, or certainly for me, formed the foundations of some of my best friendships on circuit. Just addressing the other question in the chat now about whether junior tenants market themselves other than through Chambers events. I think that is, certainly from my perspective, very much dependent on the individual members. I take the view that whilst perhaps marketing is the wrong word, I do attend other non-Chambers events. So, for example, the Chancery Bar Association has a 3-day conference in January, which I attended. There is the Contentious Trust Association. I'm going to call it a conference, but it's realistically a trip to Budapest in March, which I'll also be going on. And that's not Chambers led. That's very much on yourself to go off and find those opportunities.
Alastair, do you
Yes, I would definitely agree that it's very much up to you. There are a lot of opportunities that you can use in Chambers as well. There's often you might have probably a lecture is the wrong word, but a seminar with instructing solicitors, and you also have social interactions with solicitors as well, and it's a good way to get your name around and to meet the clients in person, because it's often a case that you're just receiving instructions via email, or you might have a letter, but it's good to have a good human connection as well. Equally, it sounds very minor, but just picking up the phone to your solicitors, making sure that they know who you are, they've got a face to put to the name, and just building up a relationship like that is really helpful when you're wanting to build relationships with clients over time.
I'd also add to not underestimate the impact of the connections that your pupil supervisor and wider team have, because that's a great source of access to clients. So I, for example, will always go out of my way to introduce our pupils and indeed junior tenants to clients of mine, and recommend them for more junior work. Our pupils will always attend our team events, whether they're seminars or other events with clients, either as a group or individually. And so a lot of the opportunities for meeting clients will come through your wider team. And I'd say just don't waste that opportunity, because it's probably the best source of introductions to not only to any solicitor, but a solicitor who already instructs your chambers and may well be open to instructing you. So I'd say don't underestimate that.
I would say as well that another thing that you can do as junior tenant in terms of marketing, which is not by means of Chambers events, is writing. There are opportunities in Chambers to get involved in writing articles for publications, for example, and that's a very good way of getting your name out there and demonstrating some expertise in a particular area. So whether that's through a Chambers newsletter or more formal publications through publishers or journals, newsletters associated with particular associations in your practice area, there is to be encouraged to look for those opportunities and take them up as a way of reaching a wider audience. So when you're thinking about your application, if you have a means of demonstrating an ability to do that, that is probably going to be a good thing to mention in your application somewhere, I would say.
Do we have any more questions? There must be more.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, given that we don't have any more questions, for Alastair, Ollie, and Jack, who've gone through the recruitment process relatively recently, do any of you have any tips yourselves for those that will be applying for pupillage this year? Any do's, don'ts, anything that you've learned from your experience that you can help those on this webinar?
I think if I start, one thing that I found very helpful, and this was actually some advice that I had from a mentor I had through Lincoln's Inn, is that when you're setting out your experience, whether it's in the section where you set out where you've worked or and any previous mooting, any mini pupilages, anything like that, just use it to highlight what you've learned from it in particular, find specific examples, and always link everything back to why you would be a good barrister, why you're keen to pursue a pupillage in this area, why Guildhall. Again, it is a piece of a piece of written advocacy, and making sure that you have a clear and persuasive application as to why you would be an excellent candidate throughout, not just in the 5 or so questions where it's set out explicitly, but throughout. I think is really helpful, and it helped me to get a lot more interviews throughout the process.
I'll just jump in with my tip before I have to shoot off. My biggest tip would be quality over quantity. As James touched on earlier, we've all seen pupillage applications where it's clear an answer has been copied and pasted, and potentially probably slightly guilty of it myself when I was applying for pupillage. But it is really about nailing down which chambers, which area of law, and tailoring your answer to each, rather than just churning out a number of applications and hoping a quantity over quality approach sticks.
From my perspective, as someone who routinely sits on selection panels, I would say learn from every interview that you have. Dissect your own performance, think about what went well and what didn't, and just try to improve. And also, if you're not successful the first time round, don't give up. I've seen people apply for pupillage 1 year and not be successful, come back the following year and they are successful. So don't necessarily think, oh, if you don't get it the first time round, that's the end of it for you. I think in this particular job, you need resilience and you need tenacity, and this is a perfect way to demonstrate that.
I would add, say something, just to add something different to those helpful tips. First of all, I think nowadays with Twitter and the various blogs that exist in all areas of law, it's quite easy, even as an applicant. In some ways, you even have more time than practitioners to keep abreast of recent developments or the big news stories in your chosen area. If you're applying to Guildhall, you're likely to be set on a specific area, and you know that you want to practice in that area. So make sure that you're on top of the big developments, the big news stories, and the big changes in that area, because it's, as I say, it's quite easy to do now. Secondly, I hope this is encouraging. If you've ever got to a second round, especially if you've got to a second round more than once, you're definitely good enough. You probably just need a bit of luck, and you probably just need to keep going. I applied for 4 years. I can't tell you how many second rounds I did. I'm not sure I really got that much better after the first year or so. But there are a lot of applicants. It's very competitive. But as I say, if you'll get into the final rounds, then you're likely to be good enough, and just believe in yourself and keep going, even if it happens to take you a few years. It's fine. When you get there, you'll have more experience. You'll probably be a better barrister than the first year when you applied. At least I'm in some ways glad I didn't get it the first year I applied. And finally, and I won't go on, but joining things like this are really helpful. I was thinking when James was talking about the structure of the interview at Guildhall, there'll be people that haven't joined this call that have been applying to Guildhall this year who won't have that information. And I won't repeat it, but because James has told you, because when you've been on this call, exactly what the structure of the Guildhall's interviews are. And so you've got that information, you can take it away and prepare for your interviews. You know what to expect, which in my view is a significant advantage again, when compared to people going into the interview who've got no idea what to expect. So those would be my 3 brief tips. There's a question about mini pupillage, which I think probably somebody else could take.
I was instead planning to take the question of how do you all personally keep on top of legal developments in your area. I feel it's a bit like with buses. You wait a long time for a question, then there's a few that come at once. I would say the first thing that jumps into my mind is look at things like newsletters, articles that are written by people in chambers. I know certainly within my team that that there have been quite a few landmark cases that have come out in this area very recently, certainly over the last couple of weeks, and also there was one a few months ago as well, in which there have been articles that members of the team have written about it. So I think that in terms of legal developments, but also just reading some of the sort of legal websites, if I can put it like that. So things like Legal Futures, where you might get updates in the area more generally as well. So I think it's just it's very similar to commercial awareness. It's the same principle. Just try and read as widely as you can and build up your knowledge in the area. Again, what you're being tested on is your how enthusiastic you are, how keen you are, and to practice in this area. And again, if you're very enthusiastic to become a personal injury or clinical negligence barrister, then no doubt you will have done a lot of reading around the area generally. I don't know about crime, how it might be different or similar.
Well, in terms of keeping on top of legal developments,
yes.
I think you get a Twitter account. There's barristers on there that spend far too much time on Twitter talking about their practices and the ills of the world at the criminal bar. That will certainly help you. You can have it all fed straight to your mobile phone. Other than that, I would say keep an eye on the chambers that you want to join. Tend to publish articles. If you've got a particular chambers in mind, perhaps look at their rivals or the other similar sets, and you will see articles. In fact, a lot of them also have newsletters that you can sign up to, and they'll go directly to your email. And then, if you like, if perhaps you don't have to consciously sit down every day and think, right, I'm going to go and read a bit about criminal law. It will come into your email inbox, and you'll click on it, and you'll naturally stay on top of things. I find as well, and this might be a way of going back to what Douglas said, of killing 2 birds with 1 stone. I find in terms of learning about specific legal change in crime, it helps me to digest it and then write about it. Perhaps if you were to do that, you would not only be keeping on top of legal issues, but you'd be demonstrating what Douglas suggested, in terms of being able to produce articles which will only stand you in good stead as a pupil or as a future tenant. In terms of, there's a question on here which is directed at me, but maybe better for James to answer, because I'm very much at the start in crime, so I accept anything. I'm keeping it very broad. I'm happy to keep a balance between prosecution and defence, and I think it's helpful, particularly at my stage, to be doing a wide range of areas in crime to get as much experience and help me decide where I'd like to focus going forward. I think specifically with Guildhall, compared to answer more directly in comparison to other chambers on the Western Circuit, there's certainly an ability to focus on specific specialisms. So I know there are people within our team who focus on fraud work, for example, or other specialist areas such as sports law and regulatory work, which I would say is less prevalent in other chambers on the Western Circuit. But James may have a wider answer.
Yes. If I just answer, I think there was another question that I can see. There was a question about the next mini pupillage window. So as I understand it, the applications for mini pupillage in 2024, so for this year, that application window has now closed, and I suspect that in the next few weeks or months the website will be updated with further information as to when it is that we will start accepting applications for 2025, but unfortunately the window for mini pupillages in 2024 has now closed. So I hope that answers that question. And then in terms of the second question about specific areas within crime, I mean, the reality is that Guildhall crime team prosecute and defend in a very, very wide spectrum of pretty much all criminal cases. And ordinarily, when a criminal pupil starts, and indeed a junior tenant, ordinarily that they will prosecute and defend in that wide range of areas, and there aren't really any specialist areas within crime that we don't do. And what tends to happen is that particular practitioners will either enjoy or prefer a particular area and end up specializing a little bit more in that area. So for example, I tend to do a lot of serious sexual offences. I'm not entirely sure quite how that happened, but I do, possibly because there is a very significant amount of that type of work now in the Crown Court. But other practitioners will specialise or tend to do a little bit more in other areas. So as Jack has said, that there are particular members of our crime team who very much enjoy fraud and will do a lot of that type of work. But I would say that the majority of our team will continue to prosecute and defend in a broad range of different areas within crime. And I think most criminal practitioners would say that they enjoy doing that broad range of work, and they enjoy prosecuting and they enjoy defending, and they probably would say that it makes them a better barrister for having that broad range. So there certainly aren't any restrictions. If particular members of the team, as they get more senior, want to specialise in a particular area, they can, and some do. But many members of the team will continue to practice in a broad range of areas within crime, and if that's what you want to do, then you'll be able to. So, really, one of the great things about being a barrister is that in some respects, you're responsible for your own destiny, and you can tailor your career as you progress and as you get more senior to what you want to do. And that, as I said, that's one of the beauties of our job, because you are your own boss ultimately, and you can decide to a large extent how your practice develops. And if you want it to develop in a particular way, you can. But as I say, I think most members of our crime team do and want to practice in a fairly broad range, and there certainly wouldn't be stopped or prohibited or encouraged to do one or the other. You can do and will be able to, not at the beginning. Obviously, at the beginning when you start, you will do the work that's out there. But as you start to develop relationships either with the Crown Prosecution Service or with solicitors, and if they think that your particular skill set is well suited to a particular area, then often you will get asked by those solicitors to do a particular case, and often that is how careers progress. But no, you will certainly get to see and will have the opportunity to practice in a broad range. So I hope that answers that question. I don't know if we've had any more. No, I don't think so. I think a few people are leaving. Debbie's left. So before we wrap up, is there anything, any other question that anybody wants to ask before we stop, or have all questions been answered? Please don't be shy. No, I can't see anything else. No, is there anything else, Doug, that you wanted to add before we end?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered everything.
Good. Okay. Well, can I thank everyone for attending? Our junior members for answering some questions, and thank you for those who have joined and clearly expressed an interest in applying to Guildhall Chambers. And I and Doug, I'm sure, would want to wish you the best of luck. And I can reiterate what Debbie said to you earlier, which is please don't be dispirited. And if you're not successful the first time around, please don't let that put you off. I wasn't successful the first time that I applied for pupillage. So don't let it put you off. If it's something that you really want to do, then keep going. And as Debbie said, learn from your experiences and take that into the next round. So good luck. Yeah, I hope I may see one or two of you again in the future.
Good luck.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks very much. Good luck.